Hello, I'm Jessica Smith, Creative Arts Archivist at the University of Manchester and Co-Project Manager of ePADD+. This presentation is a progress update on ePADD+, a collaborative project between Harvard, Stanford and Manchester universities to develop preservation functionality for ePADD. As many of you will know, ePADD is a free and open source software designed for the appraisal and management of email archives. It offers a range of automated functionality, runs through a web browser, and includes 4 modules for appraisal, processing, discovery, and delivery. A team at Stanford has been continuously developing the ePADD software since 2013. They also began to identify recently collaboration opportunities with other institutions working on similar projects related to email processing and to preservation as a new focus, and introduced the idea of a partnership with the Harvard University and the University of Manchester to explore whether our individual projects might be aligned. We were delighted to be awarded funding for ePADD+ in the first round of the University of Illinois re-grant program, Email Archives, Building Capacity and Community, which is supported by the Mellon Foundation. So recent ePADD development work hasn't been focused solely on preservation. Stanford have just released version 8 of ePADD and have just finished a Mellon Foundation funded project where they focused on 3 major development areas: creating a attachment review feature pictured on the slide, developing a shared multi-institutional email discovery platform, and improving the software's performance for large email collections of up to 2 million messages. Manchester have been working on an Arts Council England funded email archives project this year, acronym Palladium. Our involvement in ePADD+ has allowed us to focus in this project on appraisal, management and access elements in the process. And we've also been experimenting with some development work for adapting email messages in addition to restricting them, and with the potential for large anonymized data sets to support digital humanities research. So as previously stated, ePADD+ is made possible through the cooperation of many participants. Harvard Library and the University of Manchester Library are the 2 formal project partners. As the creators of ePADD, Stanford Libraries are providing valuable consultation, as is Amuse Labs, the technical team used by Stanford for the development of ePADD. The development work for ePADD+ is intended to be divided between Harvard and Manchester. The primary objective of ePADD+ is to integrate long-term email preservation functionality into the software. Our intention is that the enhanced product will provide the digital archiving community with a single tool that supports the email archiving lifecycle more robustly. Because our preservation infrastructures and workflows vary greatly across our institutions, the enhanced ePADD will support local customization and extensibility, making the preservation function of ePADD broadly applicable for diverse institutional needs. This function will be tested in the context of Harvard's locally developed DRS repository, Stanford's locally developed SDR repository, and Manchester's Preservica repository. More specifically, this project will enable ePADD to accept emails in new formats, EML and PST, alongside the current support for Mbox and IMAP. The native forms will be maintained alongside of a new normalized internal representation. ePADD will now ensure the retention and display of all mail headers and multi-part body sections. It doesn't do this currently, which is understandable, since it was not originally designed with the preservation use case in mind. All internal processing of mail will be documented as event-based change history in the metadata. This history, along with the email itself, will then be packaged together in a variety of configurable bag forms for export from ePADD and import into external preservation repositories. We put our functional specification out for comment in May of this year and received some great feedback and questions on conversion tools, file formats, and adherence to standards. This feedback also led to several iterations of the specification workflow and flowchart, the latest version of which you can see on the slide, as we realized there were several elements that we needed to clarify and elaborate upon. The spec was further refined by the input of the development teams working and consulting on the project. And through discussions with them and negotiations of contracts, we gained a clearer idea of what was feasible, both with ePADD and in the time that we had available. We also invited feedback via an open meeting in May, where we discussed with roughly 70 participants the possibilities and requirements for training, testing, and sustainability. This led us to the conclusion that we would need to provide test case email collections and a centralized testing environment to support the volunteers at the meeting who kindly agreed to assist us. We received useful feedback on the importance of presenting our supporting documentation and guides and training in a variety of formats, including short demonstration videos, and a hub for communication on issues, in addition to the more formal traditional written guidance. The importance of a centralized place for communication, both during testing and for ongoing discussion of email archive challenges, was raised, which was a pleasant surprise for our team, as we kind of assumed that the last thing anyone else would want at the moment was another mailing list. We've also been preparing for the development phase by converting our functional specification into a workflow, with each functional requirement assigned a priority. And we're now working on producing acceptance criteria so that these requirements can be converted into GitHub issues for completion. We're also in the midst of producing more detailed specifications for our preservation package and our metadata requirements. Based upon the feedback we received, we made some revisions to ensure that the project remained within feasible scope. Examples of this include using GitHub and Trello to manage development, as it was what was used by the development team that created ePADD. Deciding that Mbox would remain the sole format for processing of collections carried out by ePADD, and that files would be converted at the beginning and the end of the workflow as required. Deciding that we needed to select a single license conversion tool to incorporate into the workflow, and acknowledging that whilst we wanted to include additional data like full header information, that perhaps it was not essential for all of this data to be fully indexed and searchable. The obvious challenge to this project were the strategic and financial changes brought about within our organizations by the pandemic. I'm sure everybody will have faced similar challenges with recruitment freezes and so forth in the last 18 months, and are familiar with the delays that they have caused. ePADD Plus project team is spread across 4 different time zones, which adds an additional layer of complexity to arranging full team meetings. We also needed to factor in time difference into delays in between our team communications. This is by no means an insurmountable issue, but it does have an effect on the pace of work. Another struggle which emerged from this process was the identification of appropriate terminology to clearly and accurately describe the myriad file types that the ePADD Plus preservation process can produce and support. This challenge was brought about in part by our desire to offer as many options as possible for the configuration of the preservation package. And when we endeavored to convey these file types in our functional workflow, it became clear that fully defined descriptors and definitions for each file type were going to require additional work. I think the biggest challenge we faced thus far is that, unfortunately, the developers that were contracted to carry out the first phase of development work left the company we were contracted with in early September. We then had to collectively review our options, which included a delay of 4 to 5 months to await new developers, or a readjustment of our developer resource and projects at Manchester to accommodate taking on the development work in full. It's our intention to pursue the latter solution in order to retain project momentum, but at the time of writing this presentation, we're still working on a finalized solution to this challenge. The lessons I've learned up to this point in the project include the importance of preparation. There are some elements of the project, like developing the bag structure and the preservation metadata that we're going to include, that have become larger jobs than were anticipated initially, partly, I think, because of my own lower level of familiarity with these requirements, and partly because these topics are under review at my own organisation, so I don't have a definitive template for either of these elements at present. In such a large project team, good lines of communication are essential. I suspect if Zoom hadn't become such a ubiquitous part of our working lives in the last year, it would still have featured rather heavily in mine owing to this project. Flexibility has also been essential, particularly with the changes we've been required to make owing to the challenges previously outlined. I've also learned the importance of a degree of pragmatism, I think, in relation to the scope of ePADD Plus, and of considering it as a good stage in ePADD's ongoing evolution, rather than being able to provide a final solution to all of ePADD's preservation functionality requirements. Our next steps will be to proceed with development, finalizing the workflow's acceptance criteria and additional preservation metadata. We will be carrying out internal testing with our 3 institutional use cases, and we'll also utilize the pool of additional testers we identified through our open meeting. We'll develop guidance and training materials for using ePADD's new functionality, And we'll continue to post our progress updates on the project webpage and via social media. We hope to be able to make a final project report on the completion of ePADD Plus next year. Project updates will be posted, as I said, on the ePADD project website and ePADD social media sites. This will include information on our next open meeting, and please do feel free to join our community testing group and the ePADD user listservs for updates on all things ePADD. Thank you very much for having us.